What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to rank every new game that I played in 2024. Look, we're at the quarter mark of the year, and there's actually not too many games coming out in this next quarter, so it might not be that much of an expansive list when we do this in June, but I've actually played 10 new games, and I wanted to play more. I actually have written down 3 that I wanted to just let you guys know ahead of time that won't be on this list, but they're games that I do intend to play at some point in 2024. The first being Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, Persona 3 Reload, and then Dragon's Dogma 2. I assume they're all great games. I've heard so many positives, and I've actually covered all 3 of them leading into the release, but there's just so many long games that have come out so far this year. Haven't gotten to them yet. I promise I will at some point in 2024. Okay, with that being said, I did play 10 other games, and I gotta be honest, writing this down, looking at my list behind the scenes, for every great game, there was maybe an almost atrocious one to match it. It's a very uneven, or actually kind of maybe meets in the middle type year. So 10 games. Number 10, I'm actually going to go with South Park Snow Day. This was hard. 10, 9, and 8, to be honest with you, could really be reorganized and reshuffled however you feel like it. I'm going to say South Park because it's a mix for me of forgettable, disappointing, and bad. All 3. Sometimes a game can be bad, but it doesn't kind of stick with you, right? So if a game's terrible and then you don't think about it ever again, well, number 1, how terrible was it really? And number 2, because it doesn't stick with you, I don't know, it's just not in your head. It doesn't feel as impactful. Therefore, at least to me, maybe it's not as bad, as another game that does stick with you. So South Park kind of was a mix of all of these things. When I think about this game, I kind of get upset because I love the first 2. A Fractured Butthole was actually number 2, but Stick of Truth, right, number 1. Those games are great. And I knew what style this game was. I mean, we talked about it so much, right? Again, it's a mix of all 3 things. It's not the worst game I've ever played. It's not. But it is bad. It is repetitive. It is definitely going more live service for some reason where, they'll add episodes in over time. It's repetitive. The combat is just not good. And as I point out in my review that I honestly believe is maybe the strongest point with this game, it's not a good roguelike type game. This is a game literally about replaying the same levels over and over, picking your cards, right? And you go and you'll meet vendors, right? Basically at the beginning or end, or actually it's normally the end of each kind of stage, right? And you build up to eventually a boss. It is a roguelike game. Like that's just how it is. It's a terrible one. It really doesn't do that element of it well at all. It's a game about progression. Like you literally can just level up, and therefore your 100th run is going to be better than your 5th run just because you're going to get more, I guess, tokens or dark matter, I believe, points that you can just level up. So I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me. And then disappointing in the sense that I did know what this game was, right? Sometimes, I guess, maybe you don't know what a game fully can be when you go into it. I knew like this was going to be different than the other 2, but it still disappointed me because I thought what they were doing, they would be able to do it well. So, again, to me, this was a mix of all 3 things. Therefore, it really does kind of put this game at the end. And also, by the way, just very short. It's such a, in that way, it's almost a forgettable experience because you're done with this game in I think it took me 4.5 hours. And I think the average runtime for this game is between, 3 and 5, maybe a little bit longer if you play on harder difficulties, maybe a little bit shorter if you play with friends because you can kind of run through it faster, right? So, I don't know, just a very short and disappointing experience. Number 9, I'm going to go Skull and Bones, but again, you're going to see with number 8, as I truly mean this, you can shuffle them however you want. Skull and Bones, okay, this is more of, I would say to me, just ending the freaking saga that it was with Skull and Bones more than anything. I also don't think this game is like the worst game I've ever played. There's some puzzling decision making. They pull the act where you start the game as like an all-powerful thing and then you lose everything and you have to build back up, right? Which, I'm a big God of War guy, and God of War's done that multiple times, but I feel like they do it better. I don't know. There's some decisions with like how you get resources and you're like cutting down trees, and it literally feels like a mobile game when they do stuff like that. And also, this would probably apply to the forgettable category, and that's why I mentioned like just the saga being over. It's more of a relief that this game is actually just out, right? Like again, I don't think it's the worst thing of all time, but it's just so not impactful to me. And I have heard like the game does get better. And I mean, I barely played this thing, but I did hear, hey, if you play it 15, 20, 25 hours, it can get better here and there. I just don't like the setup and like what you're actually supposed to do. I hope I'm conveying it right, but it just didn't grab me. Honestly, that is probably the biggest thing to say for a multitude of reasons. The game just didn't grab my attention, and sitting here now, I played it the first couple days that it was out. I have zero reason or zero motivation to play that game ever again. So that kind of puts it in that bad category where it's like if I play it for 5-10 hours and I have no desire to ever go back, how can I say that was a game that, impacted me in a positive way, right? Like it wasn't. Number 8, Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad Kill a Justice League. This I'm going to put higher than the other two just kind of because I feel like it, to be honest with you. Look, I think at times this game can be fun. And, and by the way, pretty sure all of these games I've done some sort of full-length review or impressions video. If I didn't review it, I gave some sort of impressions. So if you want to know my thoughts on each individual game, you can find that on the channel, the search bar on YouTube. You can definitely find it. The long-term impacts of this game definitely are more negative, but I will say this game does have pockets of fun and does have pockets of pretty good acting and does have pockets of there is some comedicness, or however you would say that word, and it did make me chuckle here and there. Again, there is good acting, there's good story moments, but I just don't think they put it all together. I'm not a fan of how they ended it. The gameplay is fine to an extent. I believe it's just very repetitive, which, as people pointed out, and I think it's fair, a lot of these games are repetitive. It's about the hook. And I have talked about that. It's about the hook. It's not necessarily all on. Just one thing I pointed out with this game is it has 5 mission types, right? You do like the same 5 things over and over, which I think is abysmal. However, I will say there's games that are even simpler. I've been told, about Dead by Daylight. Now, I love Dead by Daylight, but what makes them different? Well, I mean, Dead by Daylight does have a lot of like meta strategy with the survivors and what you bring in, and also the killers. For each killer is going to play different. Each person is going to play those killers different. So I think in terms of that more strategic view, it just has more. But the hook is better. I just think the hook of Dead by Daylight in games that are very simple, the hook has got to be good. The hook of Suicide Squad is not good. It's fine at best to me. The running around, shooting, same kind of, samey like things. It's going to maybe work for other people. Not me, but it's going to work for other people. But that, I would say, is the main difference. It's not necessarily the worst thing I've ever played, but it doesn't grab me. And it's literally a game about grabbing you. It's literally a game where you're supposed to play this game daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. You're supposed to play this game long term. And it didn't capture that. It didn't do that right, in my mind. And then also, we can talk about the story, but we've already done that several times. So I think this game had more pockets of fun than the other two, hence why it's higher, but it's still not a good game. And then number 7, another, I would say, not good game. 7 through 10 would not recommend, overall. 7 is the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, and this was a game I hyped up. I mean, I gotta stand by, what I said, right? I have so much record, on this channel of how I think of things before, when they come out, and then after they come out. No, I wanted this game to be good. I love, I grew up on the original Battlefronts, and I've told the story before, like, those were kind of my first 2. I played Revenge of the Sith. I would play the Lego games, but, like, these were the ones before the Republic Commando, before KOTOR, like, these were the ones I played. So I have a lot of very strong memories, and look, I think it can be good. And I think in some part, it's literally just those games again. So if you don't have the desire to play those old games on old systems or whatever, there is absolutely some value here. I think, there's a couple modes obviously worth trying out, whether it's single player, etc. And then the multiplayer, I just think, was a big disappointment, right? And for me, like, I'm a game preservation guy. I have the second game. I'm getting the first game physical eventually. I will play an old game. I'll bust out the PS2. I've done it before with, like, Dragon Ball. So for me, the multiplayer was one of the biggest things that gave this value, right? So again, this is a selfish video. This is my ranking, right? For me, going into Battlefront, I wanted the multiplayer part above all else, you know what I mean? Because ultimately I'm willing to go back and plug in the old consoles to play those games if you never gave me them. So you are giving me them, and I can respect that to a degree, but then the multiplayer, they just botched, right? No crossplay, and the servers were a disaster, and from what I've seen, I don't think they're as big of a disaster, but they're definitely not amazing. The player base has dropped off a cliff, which is, I think deservedly so, because they couldn't handle the beginning. So the game, I think, is overall going to just die within the next couple months. Therefore, the multiplayer won't be in existence. You know what I mean? So it will literally just be the same games that you have, on Xbox or PlayStation. So for me, it was kind of a wasted opportunity. But again, there can be some fun, and there is some value. If you've never played those games and you don't want to get the old versions, there is reason to get this, and I think there's still something of value, right, in some of these modes. Now, what I want to say here, big jump, okay? 7 to 6, this is where we cross the line of average, and this is where we go above average at worst. At worst, we're above average. Rise of the Ronin is number 6. And this was kind of an easy one, I got to be honest. The middle of this list was a little easier because this is a good game. And again, I've made an impressions video on this. I haven't played it all the way through, and I intend to, but this is a good game. I think it's a good game. I think it's got great combat. I love that kind of mechanic. And, it's challenging, but even for someone like me who's terrible at these kind of games, I'm really enjoying it. I really am. And I'm finding it hard, but it's not like where I rage quit and throw a controller through a wall or whatever. I haven't done that at least yet. But there is also a lot of average things, right? We've talked about the visuals. And for me, it's also a little bit like, they're going big. They're going open world. And I think some of it is just a little repetitive. It does very much like hinge on the gameplay, on the combat, and everything kind of revolves around it, which is fine, but it can get a little almost lazy or just like not as impactful, right, with the other stuff you do in the game. The the co-op thing that you can do with multiplayer missions, pretty darn cool. So again, this has value. This is, I would say, a legitimately good game. But let's jump to number 5, and number 5 is actually going to be Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I think this is worth it. I think it deserves this spot, and we got more big games coming this year, so when all's said and done, this game probably falls out. I mean, I imagine it falls out of a top 10, but I think this game is worth something. It's worth talking about because this is a great game. Now I'm going to say great. Okay, so I said good, now I'm saying great. It is a great game. It is a lot of fun. The controls, the responsiveness, the parkouring, the combat, it's challenging. The Metroidvania type, feel to it. I really liked it. And I thought I would like it, but then honestly playing it, I was like, oh, no, this is better than I thought it would be. So that's kind of my biggest pitch of this game. I know people are, excited for Sands of Time, and if it's not Sands of Time, people are disappointed, but I think Ubisoft took a very different direction with this game, but I think it paid off. Now, sales-wise, sales have been reportedly very low for this game, which sucks, but I think this game is worth it. Okay, number 4, I'm going Helldivers 2. Now, don't get too mad at me. It's probably because of a lack of play. Okay, actually, at the time I'm recording this, I haven't played this game all that much. Now, when this video goes up, I actually will live stream. I'm going to live stream this Friday, but, you're ahead of me, in terms of timelines here. So maybe it goes up. Honestly, I guess that's a long story short. Hopefully, by the end of this year, I'll have played more of Helldivers, and it honestly could rise the ranks because what I played, I very much enjoyed. What I've seen, I very much enjoyed. I've been having a blast just kind of seeing it all play out, where this game is such... Now, the success of this game and how they treat their fans, like the community and all that stuff, that's not the game. I'm going to almost give them a little bonus points for that, though, because I think they've been really, really good with it. The game itself, though, lands. It's really awesome. It's really fun. And I was a fan of the first game. I don't even know if they needed, well, obviously this has paid off, right? But I don't know if they needed to make this massive shift. But again, it's worked. And the success and the popularity is probably the right word. the popularity of this game has skyrocketed. So they absolutely made the right choice. And again, just as a core game, I think the game is a blast. Never turn friendly fire off. I'm talking to the developers for that. I think that's what makes the game so good. It looks beautiful. It runs really, really well for all the stuff that's going on, and it's just a blast. And I think you can play now, and this is what I've done actually most of the time. I think this game is fun playing with friends. I think this game is fun playing not by yourself, but playing alone, but then joining a random group, right? I do think you need to play with others, but you don't necessarily, I believe, need to talk to people. You can still have a lot of fun just dropping in, dropping out. Now, to get to that next level, yeah, you probably want to have a hardcore group, right? But to just experience the fun that this game is, I think you could play it with a bunch of randoms, and I think you'd be fine. Okay, number 3, and this was something that was unexpected going into the year. I wouldn't have predicted I would have put this at number 3 right now. It's Infinite Wealth, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. So I'm big into this franchise, and for those, I keep saying it for all these videos, but I do think it's important for context. I started playing these games last year. Last February, I played Yakuza 0, and I went all the way. Now, I didn't play things like Judgment and whatnot, but I played 0, Kiwami, all the way through 6, then I played 7, then I played The Man Who Erased His Name, and then I played this. So I've played, I think, 9 or 10 Like a Dragon games in the past 13 or 14 months, okay? So I'm really big into it, and I'm kind of new to it. This game was great, but it was also disappointing. I gotta be real, and that is the biggest takeaway for this game as time goes on. Now, when I think about just kind of the casual playing experience for this game, I think it's like a 10 out of 10. There's something kind of magical about just going around doing all of these wacky things, doing the side missions that I think are actually really good. The side missions are, I feel, some of the better collections of side missions they've ever made. The combat is so freaking good. I didn't know if I would like the turn-based, going from what they used to do to turn-based, and I think it was great in 7, and I think it's honestly phenomenal in this game. Now, it's a little bit more simplified, but it's also at another time kind of more strategic. So largely, when I think about my 60 hours playing this game, I think of all the positives. I think of just, again, really enjoying being in the game and a lot of combat and a lot of that side stuff, right? Even some of the grind, which is a good grind. The story really let me down. And again, that's a big takeaway. And I don't say that to really put the game down, but to explain why it's number 3. I really thought this game could have been number 1, but the story just, I don't know, it felt very streamlined. I feel they made it for like a new audience, like they wanted to appeal to everybody, but they lost the core of what these games are. It is a little convoluted. It is a little crazy, and you keep that in the base game. There's some side missions that are nuts, but the main story did not have nearly as many twists or turns or shocking big reveals as I'm used to. And what they did to Kiryu and how they ended that story is like, I honestly don't know. I come away thinking you could have done so much more. It felt honestly it didn't feel as impactful, and it didn't feel like this concluding chapter that they kind of made it out to be when they were leading into it. So that is a big takeaway for me in terms of a negative, and that is absolutely what holds it back. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think I would move this game up at all. But the positives, I will say, the positives outweigh the negatives, and the positives do obviously put this in a top 3 contention, but there is some bad to go with the good. Okay, number 2, which is probably, number 2 or maybe even number 1 are the surprise ones in terms of where they landed. Number 2 is Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden. So this is the Don't Nod game that was actually supposed to come out last year, got delayed. I think this game freaking rocks. And this is an example of a game that kind of stays with you almost quietly. I don't think about this game every day, and I actually do think about the number 1 game on my list every day, so maybe that's, the difference there. But this is a game that really did make an impact. This is a game that I will say kind of came out of left field. Like when I think of Don't Nod, there's absolutely elements of Don't Nod in this game. Like it doesn't all catch me by surprise. But this is like a meaty, semi-open world game. It's like 20 plus hours. The quality is so high. It visually looks amazing. I mentioned quality. I want to say quality in terms of writing. The main story's awesome. The main characters of Red and Antea are some of the better new characters in the last, say, 5 years. Really, those are 2 legendary characters kind of in the making. I felt the same thing with Amicia in Plague Tale. That's how the comparison I would make. She's a legendary character that you kind of saw birthed into the gaming industry in real time. Red and Antea are, I would say, like a newer version in terms of they came out this year, right? But the side missions, there's a lot of side stuff in this game, and the quality is top notch. Even the mission design, they have to play in their own rules, but I think they make it kind of diverse. I actually kind of like the combat. It is definitely almost a more simplified God of War combat, but I think they did it really, really well. It's just overall, I would say now we're in amazing, okay? It's an amazing game. It really is, and it did catch me by surprise because I thought it could be good. I didn't think it'd be Game of the Year contender, and it is. I think from the writing, the story, the characters, their relationship, Red and Antea's relationship is phenomenal, and there's just a lot of quality from start to finish in this game, and it's not this gigantic AAA game. There's no way this game cost them $300 million, but it kind of feels like a big AAA game in the sense that, again, 20 plus hours, there's lots to do, there's just a lot of high quality, and it's like, oh my god, like these guys really cooked hard in this game that I did not think they would, to be honest with you. So again, maybe surprise of the year. Number one, which I thought would be an amazing game, but I didn't know it would make the impact on me that it did, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, I won't spend too much time. I did the Banishers review. I've done a Final Fantasy review. So, this is a game that I haven't stopped thinking about since I beat it. And we're approaching, maybe like 3 to 4 weeks since I last beat this game. Every day, I think about it. I mean, I've made plenty of videos even after the fact. It's a game. Does it have bad? It does. There's some Kate Sith box throwing moments that are atrocious. And, some of that stuff is like, how in God's name did that slip through to the base game? The good outweighs the bad. It's unbelievable how much the good outweighs the bad. I talked about this before, and I want to emphasize it for this video. I think it's a character-driven game. I think the cast of Rebirth, before my own eyes, became this rock star cast. I think of like Persona. Persona always has great cast, right? And when I stopped playing Persona 5, like when the game ended, I felt truly sad. I also felt this feeling of that'll never be matched. I need to wait a while. And you almost feel like in this funk. And I felt this actually like as a gamer where it's like no game can match that. Now, again, like can games match parts of Rebirth? Yes. But the way that cast acts, everybody, because, I mentioned a Kate Sith box throwing moment, but Kate Sith's a great character. Red, Yuffie, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, Cloud, these are insanely good characters alone, and they're even better together. And, we can talk about the story, we can talk about the combat, but just right there, just leaving at the characters, there's really no game, even coming out this year, and it's a biasness, but there's nothing that I see that can match it. And I kind of feel a little bit like lonely or like in this funk where it's like, is it worth play? Maybe you guys hopefully understand what I mean. Like, when you play just an amazing game, right? And then you say, no game can really match that right now. It's almost recency bias. Maybe a game can shock you later, but you kind of feel like, well, what's the point? Why should I play another game when I've played one of my favorite games, maybe of all time? Now, I say that, and I think I feel that to an extent. I don't know if it's one of my favorite games of all time, but the way I feel about these characters and the way I feel about the story, the main story, I know the ending's divisive, but I freaking love it. And I'm with them in what they're trying to do, and I'm willing to see it through, through part 3. So that's not a problem to me. I mentioned very briefly the combat. It's also just a fun game to play, right? There is actually some pretty good side stuff in this game. Not necessarily like the radio towers of the world, but the side missions. I would say the side missions in this game are actually really good. The mini games in this game are borderline elite. There is some, open world fluff that, that they inserted in, which I really wish they didn't. But overall, again, I think of the positives. I think of the Cloud and Aerith moments. I think of the story. I think of the ending. I think of just these character-driven moments in the game, these bonding moments, and that's what sticks with me with this game. And like I said earlier, I think really to just put in perspective, it's a game that I keep thinking about, and it's a game that I really think has like impacted me as a person, and it's a game that's impacted now my decision making and playing other games where it's like I'm not really feeling it because I how can they beat 7 Rebirth, right? So no matter how you feel about it for this video, for my ranking here, when a game does that to me, how can I not? You know what I mean? How can I not put it as my game of the year, which it is. Right now, that's my game of the year. How can I not say it's my favorite game so far? You know what I mean? Like, it made an impact that no other game did. Even if elements of other games maybe beat elements of this game, right? Like, I think some parts of Banishers are better than Rebirth, but I think overall, Rebirth left this mark on me that no game has even come close to this year. And in the past, games have done that to me, but it's one of my favorite games, I'd say, in the last couple of years, if we're being honest. So let me know what you guys think. As I said in the beginning, I'm going to probably do quarterly. So at the end of June, once we get halfway through the year, we'll do more rankings. There's not too many more games coming out between now and the end of June, so it might not be the longest thing, but I look forward to doing that. Let me know your rankings in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.